Here, two old bloggers, myself, Dave, and over there, Darren. We're ready to talk. The Vikings introduced the coordinators this week, the staff that's going to help Kevin O'Connell. We'll get into that. We'll get into some of the things that Ed Donatel in particular talked about. The multiples. What is multiples? We'll find out. Also, our deep thoughts and deep dive into the wide receiver group right after this. Skull, everybody! We're here. It's two old bloggers. We have Darren Campbell over there, formerly of Grant's Tomb and Kick-Ass Blog. Now he contributes to his own Deep Thoughts, a line of very in-depth Vikings talk that happens at the Gallahorn on Facebook. I'm Dave. I've written Loof's Locker Room was my first site, and then went on to multiple others, including Daily Norseman. I am here with Climbing the Pocket. I am also known as Producer Dave, but this is our show. Thank you, Drew, for the comment on the shirt. It was given to me by one of my grandkids. Gotta love it. Like to see everybody here. Seawise, Nick, Thomas, welcome. We have Frazier. Good to see you all. And of course, Raymond, we are glad you are here. But we're here to talk one thing, the Minnesota Vikings. And this week, we had head coach Kevin O'Connell get up in front of everybody and introduce the coordinators. Did he not?
He did. All three of them.
All three of them. And I scroll to where I need to be.
Here comes the artwork.
Yep, and there they are. Now, I have one nitpicky thing about how this press conference went off. Can you guess what it is?
I can't, Dave. What was the issue?
The issue is, and it's small, I know, but Minnesota Vikings, the coaches across the NFL have to wear now gear, right? They have to wear, and this Jimmy Johnson was the one that all started it when he got a starter contract way back when he was coaching the Cowboys. But they now have to wear team gear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they all wear team gear now. You don't see them in suits anymore unless it's the very first introductory press conference for like Kevin O'Connell. And even then they're wearing purple ties and purple shirts and stuff like that. But team gear. Do you think that they could have sold more product if they would have put the coordinators in different colored team shirts rather than all of them wearing the same one?
It's quite possible, yeah. A little bit of like a little bit of product placement there of different Vikings products, yeah. Although, as far as like for consistency and the having them all come out in with the
On the
little
same
Viking logo
page.
and well, yeah, it's all about collaboration and connecting each other there, Dave, with this new regime. So for them all have the same
Exact
Vikings
shirt.
exact same shirt with about the same fucking creases in them, and it was pretty
To
good.
me, I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and it may be a collaboration deal and coming out teamwork. Yeah, we're all dressed the same, from that old Clint Eastwood movie. Whereas Marines came out and they all had to be in the same T-shirt, and it sort of reminded me of that.
Ah, yes, that's the military in you coming
Yes.
through, Dave.
Uh huh. But you wanted to talk about the introduction of these fine gentlemen. And of course, here we have, as you're looking at the image, Kevin O'Connell's in the back up top, followed by to his right, Wes Phillips, grandson of Bum. Hamburger Hill was the movie. Yes, it was. You have the old guy in the group, but probably the one with the most energy, Ed Donatel, is your
Yeah.
defensive coordinator, the great bald one there, and Matt Daniels, who is a special teams guy, came into the league, made his money doing Heartbreak Ridge. Yes, made his money on special teams, and now he's a coach. And Heartbreak Ridge was an awesome movie. I enjoyed it completely. It's not 100%, accurate, but it was a good Clint movie. So,
What movie is
yes,
right? Based or inspired by a true story,
yes, it was.
leaving lots of room for artistic license.
Well, and that we're getting off topic here. The whole scene where the sergeant finally gets a phone call and he flips out his plastic and he calls and says, "I need to call a base." Da 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 da, and he's up in the tower trying to do that. Actually, did happen. That's based on a true story. So,
Good to know. But yeah, coordinators, David, and the first one was really that I want to talk about is Wes Phillips, as you said, son of Wade Phillips, grandson of good old Bum with the 10-gallon Stetson hat, Phillips from the Houston Oilers days, and I was interested to see what Wes had to say, because a lot of us don't really know a whole lot about Wes Phillips. We know he was with the Rams. We know he was a tight end coach. That's been his job description with the Rams and with Washington before that. That's tight end coach, always a kind of an anonymous type of coach. They don't get out and get to talk to the press much. And so it really was really interesting to see what he was going to say about his vision for the offense. And there's a lot of interest from Viking fans because, of course, he is the coordinator and never been an offensive coordinator before. And we just went through having a coordinator who was a first-time offensive coordinator, and that didn't go so well. But I felt pretty good about Wes Phillips and what he said. Unlike Daniels and particularly Ed Donatel, he was probably the most flatline guy in the interview or during the press conference. Very monotone delivery,
right.
whether that he matters or not. But I think some of the key things that he said. The thing that really stuck out to me was that again, lots of talk about collaboration, lots of talk about the need to coach not from fear anymore, but to coach. What he said was, we want players to want to be here. We want them to, when they want to do what we ask them to do. And what O'Connell said this in his introductory conference. I think Matt Daniels also said it. I believe brought it up in his in his media availability. The whole thing about, we want players to know the why about what we're doing. So once they understand and buy into the why, then it becomes easier for everybody to get on the same page. And so there's one of the themes with this coaching staff so far has been the whole, we're new, although Donatel's not new, but you know, we're going to be working with the players and not trying to work against them, or try to scare them into doing what they need to do. It's going to be a collaborative effort, just like it's a collaboration with the front office and the coaching staff. It's this coaching staff, O'Connell, Phillips, Donatel, and Daniels, a lot of words about collaboration and connecting with the players. So it feels like it's
communicating and adapting to what they want.
And so that was really the big things that some of the big things that stood out to me. I think for a Vikings fan, if you've been watching the Rams play for the last 4 or 5 seasons under Sean McVay, you have a pretty good idea of what they do on offense, and you know that you're going to see similar things with the Vikings offense. But one of the things that really with Phillips that he really talked about, and I think this is a key thing and is a big difference from with Mike Zimmer, was he got asked about, what do you see, or how do you feel about the importance of the run game? And Wes Phillips basically said, well, it's very important, but really on offense, my philosophy is winning the game is important.
Is more important.
Most important.
Yes.
Yeah. And so whatever we have to do on offense to win the game, we will do that. And he made it, what that said to me, and he said it without really saying it, was that we're not going to force the run game. If it's working, we will use it. But if it's not working and we have to pass the ball 60 times a game to move the ball and score the points to win the game, that is what we are going to do. And under Zimmer, that did not happen. If you're an offensive coordinator like Floppo the Clown and you threw too much, he freaked out, berated you, out of public eye, and then threw you some shade at press conferences and basically said, well, we got to run the ball. He did the same thing with coloring book Kubiak. And so, the whole thing was, we got to run the ball. We got to run the ball. Even if it doesn't work, we got to run the ball. Right. Well, to me, that's just, I know where you're getting at, what Zimmer meant by that in a way, because sometimes you have to try the run if it's not working sometimes to keep the defense honest, but but you can't run it 5 or 6 times in a row if you're the first 4 times
and
you
on
only got
first
a yard
and 10 every single time, and it's a little less predictable this year, but it was still so bad. One of the things about how the Rams did it, they don't run. It's not as predictable. The numbers I want to say were around 60% that they passed on first down, right? And it was different, and they mixed it up more. And I think mixing it up more keeps that defense back on its toes, like Zimmer may have wanted, more than bang, bang, bang. We're not in the days where you run Adrian Peterson smack in the middle all the time and he's going to get you yards. Those days are gone. We don't have the offensive line designed to do that. The defenses are different. The running backs, you don't have that bell cow, monster guy. Wes would know back from, watching Grandpa's tape and seeing Earl Campbell do that. That game doesn't exist anymore. It may come back eventually, but right now it doesn't exist. It's inefficient. It doesn't work. You don't have the players to do that. So if you can pick and choose when you run, and run's a relatively safe means of getting a few yards, by all means, keep that drive going. Eat that clock. but also use the more efficient passing game. And it may be the opposite. Maybe Kirk's garbage on a day if Kirk's our starting quarterback and he's not hitting squat. Wide receivers are dropping things all over the board. And he may have to go more to the run. We don't know. What I loved about Wes was his whole intention of is winning the game is most important, like you said, and we are going to do whatever it takes to do that. That is what I wanted to see in an offensive-minded Vikings coach. It's been not since Denny Green, basically, since we've seen that sort of philosophy. And that's what I'm looking forward to with this particular hire. It was mentioned before, he is the black sheep of the family because he went offense when Dad and Grandpa went defense. But can you imagine all the defensive stories and stuff he was told, from a wee little toddler growing up? This is how you do this defense. This is how you stop them. And he was trying to figure out, well, yeah, that sticks. And he goes, and this is how I'm going to beat it, right? That's the mentality I want to see in action coming this fall. And I can't wait. And he was asked about Justin Jefferson. And his quote was, I can't wait to work with him.
Yeah, who wouldn't? But
yeah.
We'll get into it a little bit later, but it's not hard to look at again what we said last week, how Cooper Kupp, the kind of year he had last year, and every year he's been in the league, and the way his career's advanced and how he's grown as a player, and just kind of dream about what Justin Jefferson can do with O'Connell and Wes Phillips and the Rams philosophy as the offensive, Rams focused offensive philosophy now being implemented in Minnesota, and what that'll mean for Justin Jefferson and for all the wide receivers. It will be interesting to see, and we won't find out for many, many, many months about this, but interesting to see how all of this, winning the game is important, and we'll do whatever is working to win the game, how that impacts Dalvin Cook's workload, usage rate, and Dalvin Cook is getting paid a lot of money to tote the rock 300 times a year. So if he's only going to tote it 220 times a year, do the Vikings want to continue to pay him? Do they want to keep him with this offense? I think that I'm kind of playing it up a bit.
Right.
If you look at the Rams and under McVay and O'Connell, they haven't been really a run by committee type team. They had, they had. Can't even remember his name now. They had, Gurley. They ran him into the ground, and really they would have used Cam Akers would have been their number one running back this year if he hadn't blown out his Achilles. So they like to use one running back a lot too, and that's probably going to be Dalvin Cook this year. But like you said, with Wes Phillips talking about, I just like the whole flexibility of it all, and I've always believed that whatever way you're moving the ball, you keep doing it until somebody stops you, and then when they stop you, you do something else.
You do something different.
And I think that
I don't know if you noticed this, but you got love from Edmonton there, Darren.
Yeah. I'm only a 15-hour drive from Edmonton.
There was one other thing I found interesting that Wes talked about. It was either during the press conference or afterwards when he talked to the press afterwards, because just like with Kevin O'Connell, these guys got a private moment with the press after the whole deal. They were asked about C.J. Ham, right? Because Ham, we love us.
I was going to bring that up.
Is a great fullback. He's a good fullback in the league. We love what he does. He's obviously Kirk Cousins' security blanket, but the Rams never played with a fullback. And he was asked about it, and he says, no, just because we have a fullback here doesn't mean I'm not going to use one. I very well may use a fullback. So I would expect to see Ham in it because he's under contract, and you're not going to get a whole lot for a fullback if you decide to trade him. And if you cut him, it's not
going to get nothing.
You're going to get virtually nothing. Same with Cook. If you cut Cook now, you're not gaining a whole lot of money because he's got such a huge dead cap money. So how he uses those guys, I'm going to find fascinating. And then there was the other one. We'll get into the wide receivers, but there's also a running back that runs a 4.3 40, and that's Kene Wangu. Why aren't you using somebody with that sort of explosive power to, get in the open and go? And I suspect that he'll be seeing some of this stuff, and we'll see it.
And Phillips didn't really. So we'll probably be moving on to Daniels here soon, but Phillips didn't mention any players by name other than when he was asked. He was asked about Cousins, but he did say, as you mentioned earlier, we have a. What did he say? We have a really talented fullback here. He didn't say CJ Ham, but that's who it is.
That's who it
which is I don't know again how much you read into this, but for him to specifically mention a fullback caught my ear because it's been discussed like. Ham made more money last year than a lot of starting running backs in the NFL, and Ham's a blocker. That's what he does. Catches the odd screen pass. Well, actually, too many screen passes last year. But he could potentially be a guy who, when you look at, like you said, when you look at what the Rams have done the past few years with no fullback, then really he's an obvious kind of candidate for not being on the team in 2022. But when the offensive coordinator specifically mentions we got a pretty talented fullback, then the wheels start turning in my head about like, well, what's going on here? I also liked one last thing about Phillips. I like the fact that he talked about really the importance of developing your entire roster, and O'Connell had talked about how Phillips has really been able to develop players. He turned good players into great players, and he turned players that other people in the building didn't think would be very good into good players. And Phillips really stressed in that little bit about that, NFL's a long season. A lot of injuries happen. You get guys that sometimes get suspended for off the field stuff. Next man up can't be just a mantra saying you've got to be able, like he really believes in everybody he's got under his charge. He's got to prepare them, develop them, make them better players so that if they have to play a lot of snaps, they can play at a high level. And that is something we have not seen from the Vikings recently. When they've had to go to a backup, it's been like, scary times.
Yeah, because of how the team has been constructed of late, where you have all your top end guys, and then you got But for Wes, I think he views some of the assets on the Vikings as, spices and ingredients in the cupboard that he's going to make something absolutely wonderful. Tonight it may be Cajun, tomorrow it may be Italian, and spice it up with a little Mexican, and it's going to be something that we look forward to finding out what happens on Sundays. And that to me is
beautiful thing. Could be a very beautiful thing. Yeah.
Now, we're going to skip over Ed Donatel because we're going to do a whole section on Ed. Let's talk about Matt Daniels.
Matt Daniels. Again, he came into his press availability all piss and vinegar, I thought. Very enthusiastic. And as you mentioned, he played in the NFL not for a great deal of time and mostly on the practice squads, but he was with the Rams, Jags, and Chargers, basically a special teams guy, and he admitted it himself when he came out of Duke, and he figured his only way to make the NFL was as a special teams, and he said, I took it in my mind that I was going to be a special teams demon. And that's how he made the money he did in the NFL and carved out a little career for himself. And when he got into but then he knew he was going to get into coaching, and he's gone to special teams coach. Never been a coordinator before, been the assistant special teams coach for the Rams, 2018, 2019, and then for the Cowboys the last 2 years. And during that time, he's worked under John Bones Fossil, who NFL fans know is one of the most aggressive, one of the best special teams coaches that the NFL has. So he has been able to Yeah, Jack Daniels, yeah, Drew, yeah, yeah, and Coke too, maybe. But one thing you got to like about Daniels is who he's been mentored by, John Bones
Bones
Fossil.
Fossil.
And Matt Daniels talked about a lot of coaches say this, but I think when you look at who he's learned under, I think that this will be true. He talked about we're going to be an attacking unit. We know that John Bones Fossil, like every other game, they got a punter. There's a fake punt or something going
Mm-hmm.
on. They're an aggressive. John Fossil special teams are aggressive special teams, and I think that the Matt Daniels is going to put that stamp on this unit as the coordinator of this team. 32 years old, so another young buck, even younger than
Mm-hmm.
O'Connell. And I think lots of enthusiasm. First time he's going to want to make an impression. Uh, one of the things he used the word connected, I think about 20 times in his press availability. So really, he seems to be very big on the fact that everybody has got to be on the same page. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
seems obvious, but you don't see it on every team.
Right.
But
And like he said, you got to take guys that are on the offense and on the defense that are generally separated, and you got to bring them together for one single purpose. And you got to connect them into what they're doing and make them have energy, right? And he was
yep,
now his presentation. He looked inexperienced behind a podium, right? He looked nervous,
yeah,
which I can
well,
understand. If you're not used to talking to the press or being in front of the cameras, that happens. But one thing that came across to me was his intensity and his energy because he was just, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Yeah, and we're going to have the guys to do this. I had heard that when he was prepping for the interview, he had not seen a whole lot of Kene Wangu before that because when we played the Rams before, Kene hadn't busted off that first touchdown run. Well, he sat there and watched the tape and he goes, "Oh my god," he's drooling, right? And it was just
yeah.
like, I got to get my hands on this guy. This is good. Um, so, hey, I like an aggressive special teams. It is part of the game. It can make the difference. Say the special team scores. That score alone gives you a much bigger bump in your likelihood to win than almost anything because it's rare that a special team scores, right? Or if it's and you want special teams generating turnovers if it's the defensive side of the special teams. It's and they're the ones that set up field position. It's it's going to be fun to watch.
I've said it before, Dave, on the show, is that special teams is notorious for every team in the league, or most every team in the league is notorious for the yin and the yang, up and down. One year they'll be really good. You'll have a really good special teams unit. For whatever reason, the next season you don't have a very good special teams unit. Last year, the Vikings special teams unit was much improved from the
Mm-hmm.
past couple of years. They were still ended up, I think, being kind of middle of the pack in overall. Although on kickoff
Right.
returns they were top of the pops, but it really Daniels is going to his job is to at least keep them where they were last year and potentially improve. And there's some questions on the Vikings special teams, which I don't want to get into a lot because that'll be the very last position that I'll examine.
Uh
But
huh.
but Barry and Joseph, the punter and the place kicker, are both free agents right now, right? I
Well,
think
one's a
so.
restricted free
Uh,
agent.
yeah, but there's no guarantee they'll be back. Uh, but
No.
so Daniels will have his work cut out for him, I think. But he does have, based on how the unit performed, and assuming that a lot of those guys will be back this year that were on special teams last year, I think there'll be a good portion of them that still are. He does have he does have a solid unit to work with and mold them into what he wants to do and make them even better and make them turn them into the
Mhm.
kind of kick-ass special teams unit that John Bones Fossil often is able to get out of his crew, whether it was with the Rams or whether it's been with the Cowboys. So excited about Daniels, his first shot at this, and he's going to give it all he's got. And one thing that has been really refreshing about all of these coaching hires right now is just like the the enthusiasm and the positivity that they're giving off to me. That really, I really like to see that. The last year or two, we heard a lot from Zimmer, and he just kind of looked like he'd accepted he like accepted surrender. He was waving the white flag a lot of times. Not a whole lot of joy, emanating out of his personality. These guys, they look like they definitely look like they want to be here. They're ready to get to work. They're ready to win. And
Mhm.
that's what I want. I want some enthusiasm. I want some positivity. I'm all for it. Let's go. Let's giddy up. Let's get going.
Absolutely.
2022 season couldn't come soon enough for me.
I agree with you, but we got a few things ahead of that, i.e., free agency and the draft. But I'm anxious to see these guys in pads and working. Our second theme of the day, in particular, we wanted to go over Ed Donatel on how, as our defensive coordinator, I noticed my background's there. We go. He's our new defensive coordinator. He is the grandpa of the group. He is
Oh yeah.
65, I think, on age. But to look at him, to look at his energy, you'd never guess it. And
That's
he's
right.
like me, Italian. He talks with his hands all the time. He was up there and pointing and doing this, doing that, and very, very energetic and willing to talk to the press when they asked him about scheme and stuff, which I liked. But what was your impression?
Same as you, David. I'd never listened to Donatel speak. I'd known his name. I'd known where he had coached in the past, uh, but and knew that, of course, that he had coached the Packers, which is big demerit point for him from my point of view. But I'm getting over it quickly. But I like you. I loved his enthusiasm at the podium, and really, he was a guy that listening to that whole 17 minutes or however long it was, I was like, man, I'd like to play for this
Mm-hmm.
cat.
Wouldn't you?
Uh, yeah, like he just he his talking about again his talk about how even though he's 65, he likes to learn about the players, learn what makes them tick, and that again seems like an obvious thing, but not every coach has that kind of extrovert personality, that willingness to get to know their players, care about them, learn about their personalities, and learn what might be the best way to reach them. Donatel
To
seems like
motivate them,
that kind of
yes.
guy. Yeah, to motivate them. Donatel seems like that kind of guy. And like I said, if I was a football player and I was listening to him talk, I'd be like, I'm going to war. Well, I don't want to use the word war because football's not war, especially what's going on now. But I want to get on the field with him
Mm-hmm.
and play for him and play my hardest for him. That was my impression of him. And Kevin O'Connell, when he was introducing them, talked about what he was looking for from a defensive coordinator was when what are the defensive coordinator I want is a guy who's when I faced his teams, he's kept me up at night. He's made it difficult for me to do my job. And he said Donatel was one of the first guys he thought of. So,
Right.
um, and again, like you said, Donatel didn't was very willing to talk about the schemes, but he was not willing to talk about players. Again, like the
The
only
only one
player
he
he
mentioned
mentioned
was Hunter.
was Hunter, but because he got asked, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But he got asked, of course, about the 3-4. You're running a 3-4. He said yes, but then he said, "Don't read too much into that because, like you talked about." He said the big thing we want to do is we want to make things as difficult on court. Everything we do is going to be about making things as hard on the quarterback mentally and physically as we can. That's their number one objective. And he talked about the whole multiple fronts. That's what they're going to try to do, which
Right.
makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. When
And
asked
you can
about the
kind of get into
3-4, he
what that
says,
means.
yes, that'll be our quote base, but we're running multiple fronts. We're running 3-4 and 4-3. And most of the time, we're going to be in nickel with even or odd man fronts. And for those that don't quite know what those fronts are,
Oh, look at those graphics, baby.
um, I brought this up. On the top, you got the 3-4, um, and it shows defensive lineman. Does not show the safeties on that one. And you can see how they've shown a defensive end, but it's also known as defensive tackle. In more a modern 3-4, they're defensive tackles versus defensive ends. You're not going to see Hunter go inside where it says DE. That's going to be a Dalvin Tomlinson or a
James
Watts
Lynch.
or a Lynch type spot. And what he said about Hunter's going to be an outside linebacker slash defensive end. And those responsibilities are real similar. In a 3-4, like up on the top here, your outside linebackers marked by strong side the S, B is backside, are the ones that set contain, right? They're the ones outside the edges of the O line, normally where a defensive end lines up. He's usually out on the widest guy. And the difference here is you got your nose guard who's either up on the center or just slightly off, and they're playing gap and a half like I explained last week. The 4-3, what we're used to, you can see here. We've got the two defensive ends on the outside of the line. You got a defensive tackle with the 3 technique, and you got a nose tackle who's in one of the A gaps off to the side. They can flip that. It doesn't matter. And then the nickel, because he knows these guys have been playing 4-3, he knows they played 3-4. Zimmer, believe it or not, mixed it up last year. And then the nickel can go with either. Either you bring in that third, you drop a linebacker off the 4-3 and you bring in your nickel back, or off the 3-4, you drop the backside linebacker and bring in that nickel back. That's the way it's set up. Both of those, Hunter will shred even more. I agree, Drew. I think he will. Either one of those, his whole idea is I'm going to make it the most difficult for the opposing team I can. And if they're used to seeing a 4-3 in a certain setup, I'm going to give them a 3-4 because they're not used to it. And if they're used to a 3-4, I'm going to give them a 4-3. And I'm going to mix it up all during the game to try to get their offensive lineman and their center or their quarterback who's calling who's got the mic and who's got, their blocking assignments to get them all confused. And that's the way it's almost mirror what Wes is trying to do. He's going to do everything he possibly can to win the football game, to score points. On the defensive side, Ed's going to do everything he can to confuse the offense and to stop them from scoring points. I love the aggressiveness on both sides of the ball.
And assuming that Hunter is going to be part of the Vikings in 2022, let's be clear, where if he's playing linebacker or defensive end, he's going to be rushing the passer. That's what he's going to be doing. And we know that he's very, 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 very good at that. So as Drew said, he's going to shred, whether he's outside linebacker or defensive end or whatever you call him.
Right.
But he's going to be getting after the quarterback. Donatel in his presser, again, you're reading through things and you're like, trying to figure out some of the things that what the Vikings defense is going to look like and what his vision is, and 3 things he pointed out that he's going to. And there's a coaching saying I heard a basketball coach say once, saying it's not what you teach, it's what you emphasize. And so what that means is that sure you're going to teach a whole bunch of things, but day in and day out, if you preach 2 or 3 things those are the things you're probably going to excel at. And what Donatel said that was, we're going to set hard edges. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the Vikings have had a real problem with that the last couple of years, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that calls into question to me what DJ Wanham's role is going to be, because he has been a guy who's been accused of not being very good on backside contain, on setting a hard edge at defensive end. So we'll see what Donatel thinks of DJ Wanham, despite the fact he was our leading sack guy last
Mm-hmm.
year. The other thing that Donatel said is that we're going to be a great tackling team. Okay, easy to
Yes.
say that, but again, the emphasis is on that. The Vikings 2020, I thought was worse than 2021, but our
They both
tackling
were not good.
could be better. Yeah,
Yeah.
our tackling could be a lot better. A lot of missed tackles. And the third thing he said was we're going to focus on taking away the ball. Last year, the Vikings were a bit better on turnovers than in 2020. But again, really, particularly on the defensive backfield with the corners, and particularly under Zimmer, the whole time he was here, they didn't really make a lot of plays on the ball, I felt.
Right.
So there was a certain technique that they were taught, that they weren't going to take chances when the ball was in the air. It sounds like Donatel is not going to be that way, that he's going to be like, hey, we want people with ball skills. We're going to look to rip the ball out on run plays, and we're going to look to intercept it on pass plays. And I like all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. He also talked about thick, or hit the blocks. He wants
Mm-hmm.
thick linemen where they're holding their own. They're playing gap and a half. They're holding their own, ready to go. That the linebackers are the second level, and the defensive backs are your third level, coming in and filling in, and how that works as a meshed unit. I look forward to that greatly, seeing that. The whole idea. A lot of these guys, Mike Zimmer was a great defensive coach. When you have a defense named after you, you're good, right? And he had
Yeah.
most of these guys taught well. This will be taking it just to that little bit next change, the next level, and they can hopefully get, what they've learned previously and take that and go, oh, I'm going to apply this and get even better, which they need to. We need a better defense. We obviously have holes on the defense, which we talked about before, lack of corners, linebacker depth, et cetera, et cetera. But I look forward to how he works with these guys and how he gets them playing.
Indeed, and one last thing that I don't want to forget is that he also talked about, which I think we'll have to look at as far as how the Vikings will play defense in 2022 under him, is that he talked a lot. He talked about corners have to be able man to man. Corners, he likes corners to play man to man, and so it appears that the Vikings
It's
are going to
my
be. I
last
don't
line
know
on
what
the notes.
yeah, I don't know what the Vikings percentage was last year with Zimmer, how they zone versus man to man. Everybody plays a
Right.
little bit of both, but Donatel seems to be, he wants guys, corners who can play man to man, and that's going to be a challenge because
We don't have any.
really we don't have any, right? And
Um,
can Cam Dantzler hold up as man to man? Can Chris Boyd and Harrison Hand hold up as man to man? I think that also is going to inform what the Vikings do in free agency, and particularly in the draft. I expect they're probably going to take two corners in the draft, and if they take two corners, I expect that, from what Donatel says, that those corners are going to have to be strong press man to man corners.
and I was about to say, Quasey now knows that when he has the scouts and everybody looking, they're going to weed out. I need to find the man to man. That's my number one priority. Can they play man to man? We can teach them zone. Um, we're gonna, in a cover 6 look or cover 3 look or whatever it is, but they've got to be able to play man to man, and Quasey's going to be the one that works that end.
That's right. Quasey and the Scouts, and maybe Scott Studwell.
Ooh.
We'll see.
Andrew says, "Get Rodgers out of the divisions, out of here, and the Vikings will build a dynasty." Andrew, I sure hope so on both counts.
I don't know. I'm not convinced that A-Rod is going anywhere this season.
He may or may not.
We can always hope. We
we
thought
can
when Favre
hope,
was
or if
out
he
of
comes,
town that we were,
yeah,
yeah, we thought when Favre was out of town that it was all smooth sailing, but that's not how it turned out.
yeah. But I know they want to play that Love. Um, I mean, they drafted him and they want to play him, so we'll see. I hope they kick him out. They're in worse cap trouble than we are, so we shall see. On to our final topic, our wide receiver stable.
Moving on to wide receivers, our latest positional unit that we're going to look at here at Two Old Bloggers, and excuse me while I burp, beer burp, uh, but doing cleanses. Rogers, we love making fun of him. Just too bad we have to play him twice a year. But yes, wide receivers. You've got the whole crew there. We got the forgotten man, BC Johnson on the left, KJ Osborne in the middle, Amir Smith Marset, then JJ and Thielen. And really, I feel that the Vikings wide receiver position right now it's in pretty good shape as we speak right now. Uh, Justin Jefferson, one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. Depending on who you'd ask, he might be top 3. And he's a guy, we talked about it earlier. He already said when O'Connell was rumored to be the head coach, or pretty much assured to be the head coach, that he was excited, extremely excited that O'Connell was coming, was going to be the first offensive minded coach, off a head coach he would have had as a pro. And you got to feel that he's going into his 3rd year. And he's got to be thinking, man, I've got, after my 3rd year, I can start ponying up for an extension, a big extension, and I just need a big year to get that. And if he looks at what Cooper Kupp just did under O'Connell and McVay, he's got to be like licking his chops at what he could be happening for him in this offense in 2022. Because if you throw the ball to him, you make it a point to throw the ball to him, he's basically unstoppable. He has showed that the past 2 years. And really, I think that he had 108 catches last year. I think that, if he stays healthy and plays all 17 games, 125, 130 catches are in play for Justin Jefferson.
Without a doubt.
Really, without a doubt. Because the Vikings, O'Connell and Phillips, I'm not saying they're going to force the ball to him, but they're going to make a point to get him the ball as much as they can, and which is a smart move and something that the Vikings last year, for whatever reason, it took them half a season to figure out that they needed to do that, which is amazing. So Justin Jefferson, a great building block for the Vikings wide receivers. Again, really, he's been completely healthy this first 2 years. We can pray that he doesn't get hit with the injury bug that stays. KJ Osborne, a guy who showed tremendous growth in his 2nd year. He went from 0 offensive snaps to being a very dependable and dangerous 3rd wide receiver. And really, he's a guy that I think we can feel good with Keenan McCardell back as the wide receivers coach, that he can grow even more. Maybe he can become into really our number 2 wide receiver in the following years. And really, Amir Smith Marset, there's a kid that really in preseason, when you watched him, now mind you, he didn't have much to work with on the field along with him, but he didn't seem to be able to get open. He was dropping a lot of passes. And in the beginning of the year, he was a guy who was on the sidelines, didn't really dress. But later in the year, injuries forced him to get more playing time. But when he got that playing time, he made the most out of it. And I don't think you don't want to read too much into his last couple of games, but nonetheless, a guy
But it
who
showed progress, and that's what you want to see.
It showed progress. He looked like a totally different guy late in the year than he had been in the beginning of the year, and I think that a lot of that has to go to Keenan McCardell and the work he did with this kid. And so another year with Keenan McCardell, maybe Amir Smith Marset is a kid who's going to be, much better than maybe any of us could have anticipated. But I'm excited to see I'm excited to see what his growth is going to be like in year 2 in this offense. I feel good about having him there. BC Johnson. I know that His second year with the team was a bit of a buzzkill, but as a rookie, he really surprised a lot of Viking fans with his ability. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's got, good. His hands are fine. As a guy who could be your number 4 wide receiver or maybe number 5,
Right.
I think that, I think he gives you good depth,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to be a guy who will be. He'll need to prove something too, because he'll be looking for another contract and another job after this year. It might not be with the Vikings, but maybe it will. So really, that
Yeah, for him,
he's
it's
a guy that,
contract year, so he's going to want to prove himself. And that's always
and
lovely extra motivation when it comes to football players. They tend to play
and I
better.
think that's right. And I think he's a solid guy. He's not going to be a superstar, but you could do worse as a number 4, and we have many times. The big question for the Vikings wide receiver is, of course, the hometown boy, Adam Thielen.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guy
And it didn't
waiting drum
load.
roll for the
Gotta be kidding me.
pitcher.
Hold on. It didn't load for some reason. Where is he? Where are you, Adam? I made you. Where is it?
I made you. Where are you?
Here it is. Let's drop it.
The suspense is killing me.
Boom.
Oh, and Stefano art too.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. That looks super. But Adam Thielen, Viking fans love him. He's a guy that, hey man, we all know the story. Undrafted, practice squad, just worked himself up to become a star in the league. But he carries almost a 17 million cap hit next year. He's a guy. He hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2018. He'll be 32 in August. He's a guy who's been nicked up a bit, missed games missed at least one game the past 3 years. So when a guy has got that big of a cap hit, he's not your number 1 receiver, and he's over 30, and you're starting to worry about, is he going to be a guy who's now always going to be nicked up? He's getting older. He can't recover from injuries as well. The Vikings have to look at how can we fit him financially on the team. I think they want to keep
Or
him.
move him. I think they do want to keep him. And I know he has said this week, I saw reported that he wants to stay. And he was asked about taking a pay cut, and he said, well, we might have to make it happen. He may be willing to take a pay cut. I say restructure here. I don't want to restructure and throw money out further. I don't think that's the wise route for the Vikings to go. I think they would be, here, we want to keep you, but we don't want to pay you this much. Would you mind making $8 million this year instead of whatever it was? And see if
he did restructure. He did restructure last year, and now that didn't really hurt him financially, I think, because he got like a signing bonus instead of, and they reduced the cap hit. But like you said, it kicked the can down the road a bit. And really, with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as the new GM, he may have a different idea on like what the Vikings should be doing financially with some of these veterans than Rick Spielman would have had. And like you said, I don't think that restructuring a guy like Thielen at 32 is what he wants to do with this Vikings team. So, but I feel that Thielen will be back. I'm confident about that because, like you said, he recognizes that he's one of the guys that is going to be approached about the financials. He has expressed an interest in staying with the Vikings, and unlike Cousins, I think he actually he means when I want to stay with the Vikings, he means I'm actually willing to take less money to do so. Take a pay cut to do so. I think he will be back, and that would be good for the Vikings to be back because I'm not entirely convinced that KJ Osborne is ready yet to be the number 2 guy. And the other thing about Thielen is that even though he hasn't had a 1,000-yard season in 3 seasons, he does have 24 touchdown catches the last 2 years.
Yeah,
and
he's
as
said before, he's the red zone threat.
That's a fucking lot of touchdown catches. And he missed 4 games in those two seasons. So he's still effective, I think, for one more year at a reasonable price. I want AT back as your number 2 guy. Got Justin Jefferson as your number 1, KJ Osborne as your number 3, and you got Amir Smith-Marset and BC Johnson as your depth guys. Giddy up, let's go. I think there's been talk about, well, will the Vikings draft, go after somebody like Allen Robinson in free agency? Well, that ain't going to happen because I don't think we got the money to do it. And why would Robinson come to Minnesota when JJ is already here and is the
Right.
number 1 guy? I just don't see Robinson doing that. I think he's going to go where he'll be the number 1 guy and be paid as such. And the other thing is, drafting wise, I really don't see that the Vikings I don't think they'll draft any wide receivers in this because we've got too many other needs, particularly a corner, linebacker, and on it goes. And we only have the 8 picks right now.
Right.
But in free agency, one guy, and you just put his name up there, one guy I would like to see the Vikings go after is Jakeem Grant. Who is Jakeem Grant? Well,
he's obviously a Miami Dolphin.
He was, but he was with the Bears this year. He got traded to the Bears. But he is a guy, they call him Mighty Mouse, 5'7". But I think he could be a pretty good number 4 gadget guy for you. Somebody like we haven't had since David Palmer, really. Somebody you could use as a few plays. He's a very explosive, a threat every time he gets the ball to take it right to the house. And if you watch the Bears-Green Bay game at Lambeau this year, you would have saw him do that twice, one on a screen and one on a punt return. And the other reason, he's never caught more than 36 passes in a season. But he's a guy you could bring in at a pretty low cost, and he's going to accept a number. He's a guy who will accept a role as a number 4, will accept a role as a complementary player, but he could really add a little bit of extra juice to this offense. And the other thing about Grant is that he's a hell of a punt returner, and he's had 4 punt returns returned for touchdowns in his career. And if you got him and Wangu as your return guys and kickoff and punts, talk about the special teams unit that you've developed. Explosive. And if somehow Wangu tweaks a knee again and he can't return kicks, then Grant has also returned kicks in his career lots, and he has 2 kickoff return touchdowns in his career as well. So I think he could give you something on offense and give you a lot on special teams, and you wouldn't have to pay too much to get him.
Interesting. It's somebody to watch, somebody to look at. We've got free agency coming up quicker than the draft, but we have right now coming up in the near future combine. We should hear tons and tons of rumors coming out of the combine because that's when scouting staffs and coaching staffs and everybody goes there and they go watch players in their underwear do the jumps and everything else, and then they go out and drink afterwards and gossip and not negotiate, but negotiate. Wink, wink.
Yes. Yes.
Free agents and such.
I'm sure we'll hear lots of Cousins and Hunter rumors at that point in time.
I am sure we will. Well, that is all 3 topics for today. We want to thank everybody for watching. We appreciate you coming. Any last words there, Darren?
The only thing that I'm going to say is it was mentioned by, I think, all of the coordinators is what they're really doing now, and O'Connell has said it as well, is their big focus is getting to know our roster, is what they said. And again, so really what we're getting, what's going to be this is really going to be informing what players the Vikings keep and who they go after in free agency and in the draft. So getting to know that roster also means that guys like Donatel and Phillips and O'Connell and Daniels are going to look at people like CJ Ham or other guys like Cam Dancer, you name it, and think, that guy isn't really going to be able to fit what we're going to do.
Right.
And so getting to know the roster also means they're going to determine which guys they're going to get rid of, as well as keep and bring in. So it's going to be a really interesting time, and
they even
can't
mentioned
wait.
they're not done going through the roster, and then
No,
they've got a bunch of stuff to do yet. And because they were assembled late, they had to wait till after the Super Bowl. They've got to compress a whole bunch of work. Now, I was listening today, I want to say, to a couple of scouts from the Vikings, and they were talking how today's technology makes it easier to do a lot of the work. They can knock out 4 or 5 teams in a day looking at multiple players, whereas before it may used to taking them, maybe 2 teams in a day, and if they were going down to Alabama, maybe 2 days to get all of the players on Alabama to work up their draft.
yeah,
To work up their write-ups on the particular players. They got a lot of work to do. So they first got to do it with everybody that's on the team. Then they've got to start looking in available free agents and do that. And all the while, the college guys are putting together their stuff. And it's going to be busy times. And it's going to be fun because we're going to hear all sorts of stuff. And we're going to be here for you to talk about it on Saturdays with 2 old blockers.
Yeah, we'll find out if there'll be, in getting to know your roster means there's going to be some surprise decisions made by the Vikings that either we thought were far-fetched or weren't going to happen at all.
I would almost guarantee it.
Yeah, because the coaches have decided that certain guys don't fit what they want to do, and they've got to move ahead with some new guys to do it.
Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we got to make cap space,
yep,
some way, shape, or fashion to get underneath the cap for the season and hopefully build a long-term dynasty. Like I saw that word earlier in a comment. It's going to take some time. So let's see. My friend from Pittsburgh, C-Wise, what'd you say? My friend from Pittsburgh says you can keep nerdy cousins.
Keep nerdy cousins.
Uh-huh. How much will the Vikings need Mon? 6th rounder in 2022? I said, what?
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious. I am curious to see what the offensive guys, when they evaluate Mond, and what they see there as potential. It was pointed out today, if you look at pre-draft write-ups, look at Mond's and look at Dak's. And they're almost identical.
I did look at those up.
And
a lot of similarities.
Size-wise, hand size-wise, a lot of the attributes, everything else. And if Mon can turn into another, Dak, hell yeah. Oh, yeah, baby.
Yep.
So, we shall see. Anyways, my last words are, keep Ukraine in your prayers. I love that those guys have some big sets of them. They are fighting for their lives. And they're in my heart. I watch it, from my old life. So, and that the world stays relatively peaceful and that whatever is happening over there ends soon. So we can focus mainly on
little loss of life as possible.
Yeah. So we can go back to focusing on family and football.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
With that, what do we say?
We say, I got to do the Drew Bunting 2 fingers. Nope, I can't get it. Skol Vikings!
Skol Vikings! Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.